Hi everyone, welcome to your Friday deep dive. Always so happy to kind of be here, work with you again on a Friday whenever I have the opportunity, which I absolutely adore doing and covering Bon. It just so happens that at the moment I still am at home with my little boy. So I've pre-recorded this, but I will be able to look underneath at the comments at 10:15, like your usual time, and you'll be able to kind of get any feedback from me. If you're struggling with anything, let me know. If you wanted to ask me any questions, I'll be on there. It's just my 3-year-old doesn't make for a quiet, peaceful space to kind of speak with you properly. So I'm going to work with you today. From this point of view, and again, I'm here to support, and I'll be doing the exact same thing next week. So you will see the upload. It'll come maybe just a little bit earlier usually than 10:15, so that it's up ready for you. If you're a creature of habit, you like to use that timing, great. If you want to play it any other time, it's there, ready, off you go. Today's topic is something that I actually think is really, really powerful to talk about. And it's about this concept of compassion fatigue. I do not know if you've ever come across it, but it's the kind of idea when you think of the word compassion, we really do think about the way that we care for others and the way that others care for us. And there is this level of exhaustion that sometimes is paired with anybody who's experienced trauma. And so it's interesting for us to explore compassion fatigue because we know, obviously, that trauma does not just affect the person directly. It often is something that feeds into our relationships, and it's something that we work together, or it impacts on different decisions, feelings, emotions, moments, and, triggers and things. They affect the person, who has experienced the trauma, but equally we have this element of how does that affect feelings of others and in turn affect us again and how we feel. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this concept about compassion fatigue, and it's all about when trauma kind of drains the people we love. How can we kind of get a little bit of a hold on that? How can we recognize it? How can we rein that in? How can we just find our way through that? Because it is inevitable. We're human. And so I want you to know, if that is something that you have experienced, like, that is all good. It is all okay. And these kind of talks are really great ways for us to kind of lean into recognizing, learning, and kind of moving through it. So, yeah. Bear with me. Let's see what you have in common with it. Maybe what you can take from our talk today, from our lovely deep dive. So compassion fatigue, if we were to really break down that definition, it's something that we don't often talk about in our personal relationships. I know it's something that took me a while to open up about when I, ended up in a relationship with my now partner. But it really is real. And it's a significant part of who, the person who's experienced the trauma. It's part of their story, their chapter. You and I get that so much. And so, of course, it's going to be part of us. It's going to be part of what we bring to a relationship. It's usually kind of associated, this kind of compassion fatigue can be associated often with caregivers, therapists, nurses. But the truth really is that it happens in relationships every single day. Trauma doesn't just affect, like I said, the person who's experienced it. It kind of ripples, doesn't it? Touching the lives around them. Partners, family members, close friends. And it influences the way that we behave, how we often communicate. It influences how we show love, how we accept or reject kind of love. And yeah, it's how we respond to stress is often linked to the experience of trauma. We've been learning so much in this program. Doesn't matter what part of the journey you're on, but we're really looking at kind of our stress response, that fight or flight response, learning about the brain and the nervous system. And all of that's going to be hyperactive if we've experienced trauma, because the body, like we've said, is trying to keep us safe. So sometimes that overcompensation, that sensitivity just ripples a little bit. And over time, sometimes we can be really aware of it, and other times maybe the person who's experienced trauma is not aware of it. Those closest to us can maybe feel, though, a little bit emotionally drained, exhausted. Maybe there's moments when you just feel a little bit disconnected. And again, I'm telling you this because if that is true for anybody listening, that is so normal, okay? It's not anything bad. It's just someone's experienced trauma, and that effect, it's going to be inevitable part of that chapter and part of strengthening that relationship as you work through it. But the key takeaway here is trauma wasn't done to you. It was done to you, not because of you. Let me say that again, sorry. So trauma was done to you, but not because of you. So this is not about like any blame. It's just about kind of finding some awareness, seeing ourselves, seeing these moments that we're having, maybe those triggers, and how we can work together to just be a little bit more conscientious if it is rippling. And if it's rippling a little bit more at certain times, it's just about communication. And it makes such a difference to open that up. And then when we kind of strengthen it, we know it, we recognize it, it sometimes really makes a relationship much stronger because there's this really cool element of getting to know each other and feeling extra support. So today's a little bit about, if that is something true to you, it might not be, it might not at all, but if it is, this is about us looking at how maybe we can begin to break that cycle. So compassion fatigue, again, adding to our definition, is the emotional exhaustion that happens when someone has been giving their energy, their patience, their emotional support to another person for an extended period of time. And they might begin to feel like they have nothing left to give. You might have been in a position like that with somebody before. You feel like, actually, I'm giving everything that I can to this person. I know they're going through a lot, but I'm feeling a little bit drained from that. And that's all right. It's because there's this lovely, deep care. And sometimes we need people. We need to lean on people. People are, we're human. We need that. We need other people. We need to talk. It generates oxytocin, closeness, supports us in getting all those positive hormones going. But equally, if, you are the person that somebody's really leaning on, sometimes there's a heaviness there, and there can be compassion fatigue. Again, it's normal. And I think that it's interesting because it's different from like a general stress or burnout. Stress comes and goes, and burnout usually happens over a long period of time. But with compassion fatigue, it's kind of deep emotional kind of depletion that comes specifically from caring deeply about someone who is struggling. I know throughout my life, there have been many moments, whether it's through really close friends that have gone through some tough times that have really leaned on me, or family, that there are moments when it has felt like, I want to be there. I wouldn't trade this for the world. I want to be that person. I want to be their person. But it is normal if there is that like element of exhaustion that comes with it. And this is why it happens so frequently in our relationships where trauma is present. It's really normal when someone has been through trauma. It's common, right? It makes sense. They've often experienced real emotional ups and downs, moments of fear, sometimes moments of anger, maybe moments of withdrawal, or even kind of an intense neediness. There might be a point where like just feel safer with that person. And a partner or a loved one, in their efforts to be really supportive, can sometimes slowly take the emotional weight of that trauma, right? And they choose to do that, or maybe you chose to be that for somebody. That's a beautiful place to be. But over time, the truth is it can be emotionally exhausting. And that's just it. We're human. At some point, we might just need to refill that cup. We might need to find a way through. And again, if somebody's emotionally exhausted, they might begin to kind of withdraw, maybe not kind of be as readily available. They might become maybe sometimes a little bit more irritable or less patient or less responsive sometimes. Sometimes they might start feeling guilty for needing space, but also there's an element sometimes of people that might feel a little bit resentful for always being the strong one, right, in a relationship. And sometimes that's where relationships start to feel a little bit wobbly. There might be just a little bit of, we need to get back on track. And remember, every relationship that we have, whether it's a partner or a family member, it all takes work, right? It doesn't just run happy families. All of these things are human. And it's about just finding our way to use the challenges to strengthen our relationships. So it's recognizing, and as we learn this, we can learn about how we might have felt in situations, right? Compassion fatigue doesn't mean at all that a partner or a friend doesn't care anymore, though. That's super important. It's important to notice because somebody might have felt like, hey, that person's like they were there for me, and then all of a sudden they weren't. We have to find like a compassion for that person as well and go, hey, actually understand. Maybe they just are feeling that compassion fatigue. That's a real human reaction. It is heavy carrying the weight of people suffering sometimes because, especially when they're friends, family, a partner, it's deep. It's, your heart might hurt for that person, or that person might be feeling that for you. So it's really, really interesting just to explore and remember that if somebody does kind of pull away, needs some space, it does not mean that they don't care anymore. It doesn't even mean that they're abandoning the trauma survivor. It means they're just emotionally depleted. Think of it as like a phone. It needs recharging. That's it. And here's kind of the hard part of all of this. Something that I've learned is that it's rarely talked about in trauma recovery. And so I think it's a powerful topic, obviously sensitive maybe for some of us, but very real. And maybe some of the guidance tonight can support us as we support others and others support us through our challenges. It needs to be talked about because when we understand that all of this is happening, not out of rejection, but maybe just emotional exhaustion, it can actually prevent us from really deeply damaging our closest relationships. We're able to go, do you know what? Yeah, I am going through a lot and you've listened to me loads. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate if you just, I get it that you need some space this week. It's fine as long as we're recognizing that it is not that sense of abandonment and that, that person still adores you or we still adore that person. There's still love there and care there, but there's sometimes just needs that little bit of resetting. So how does trauma responses or how do our trauma responses and behaviors actually affect people around us? It's interesting because we naturally won't actually heal in isolation. And what I mean by that is I'm sure Bon has talked to you about like community, getting out, moving, being on our own is much harder to work through our trauma. We do need other people. Our trauma doesn't just live inside of us, it interacts with the world around us. And the people closest to us often feel the effects most. So we have a few ways. I'll give you some examples of how it kind of happens. So one of the concepts that's kind of highlighted is emotional volatility. And emotional volatility is this. It's when trauma can create real intense emotional highs and lows. I can definitely relate to that. So maybe one moment someone might be deeply affectionate and the next they might be overwhelmed with fear and anger and start pulling away. This kind of unpredictability, normal, absolutely understandable for somebody who's experienced trauma, but it can often make loved ones maybe feel like they're walking on eggshells, never really knowing what to expect. I think that that's really common. And the more that we talk about it and the more that we name these things, the more that we can open up a conversation, possibly with a partner and say, do you know what? I know and I'll recognize that through my trauma, I do experience some highs and lows, but I still want to, make you feel heard and seen, that I do care and I just need those moments. This is part of my chapter. This is part of my healing. There's another one is another kind of way that it might come out or it might show is the idea of hypervigilance and maybe wanting to have kind of a sense of control often. So trauma, it really teaches the brain that the world isn't safe. And that can kind of show up as needing control in relationships sometimes, because it makes somebody feel safe, doesn't it? It makes us all feel safe when you know what's coming. And what happens is our amygdala goes off, doesn't it? It's hypersensitive. It's almost like that fire alarm is going off when it doesn't need to. And when you're in a relationship, when it's hypersensitive, then often you're looking around, always thinking that something's going to go wrong. And in order to make yourself feel calm, what we tend to do as trauma survivors is we try to control things. I really noticed that in myself. I'm somebody that has had to communicate with my husband based on my past trauma. I've had to say to him, listen, I really struggle when we change plans last minute. And that's the truth. I actually love knowing what my next day looks like, what the day of the weekend. I'm even cool even if the day is planned that we're going to relax and see how the day goes. That's enough for me to understand that that's what's going to happen. But I really struggle sometimes when something random's thrown in to the day and it wasn't planned. My ability to shift and change is massively affected by my feeling that I need to know what's happening, because when we go into something unknown and we've experienced trauma, we have that hyperactive amygdala. Now, any human being, whether they've experienced trauma or not, their amygdala is probably going to go off in a sense of the unfamiliarness, the unknown. We naturally kind of scan the area in our stress response to go, is this safe? Am I safe? But those of us who've experienced trauma, it's heightened. It's happening way more often. And if we have a plan for what our day looks like, we know what's coming, we feel safer. We feel calmer in our mind and our body. But for a partner or in a relationship or leading a family, that could really feel like micromanaging. And it can maybe feel like questioning a partner's every move, or kind of reacting strongly to small things, something that I work on a lot actually in my own relationship. A loved one can start to sometimes feel maybe it's smothered, or like nothing they do kind of feels quite right. And that's not all the time, but there could be little phases, moments, seasons where the person who's experienced the trauma is potentially just feeling a lot or triggered. And again, that is okay. That is normal. That is the body going through that stress response. But that adds to this hypervigilance. I think I need a little sip of my tea as I record. Give us a second. Control issues. So I want you just to think about that. See if there's anything you can relate to. Maybe not. Another way that it comes out in us is sometimes a sense of avoidance and emotional withdrawal. Again, there's this sense when the body feels uncomfortable, triggered, we go maybe into fight, flight. And flight is that feeling of like withdrawing, maybe avoiding. Freeze is the idea of avoiding. And that's a natural reaction for the brain, the body in a stress response. And again, our stress response is heightened post kind of traumatic experiences. So we may, on the flip side, trauma can maybe lead to almost like an emotional shutdown. You could be with a person in a relationship for a really long time, but still feel like you want to withdraw because it feels safer. Someone might just isolate, push people away, or even struggle to communicate their needs. And this can sometimes leave partners or friends feeling shut out, confused, or sometimes like they don't quite matter. And so it's about being aware of that. Am I withdrawing a little bit? Or is the person that I'm caring and compassionate about withdrawing? How does that make me feel? It's about looking at it from both points of view. You supporting others or others supporting you, should you be the one who's experienced that trauma. It's looking at, how could this ripple maybe affect the way that I am in my relationship. I also think it shows up in the idea, I made a little note here, that it feels something that I don't know the like scientific term, but it's this idea of like sometimes there's this feeling of like feeling too much or also not feeling enough. Trauma survivors often carry like a deep-seated feelings of being a burden. And that's something that needs to be kind of worked through in terms of limiting beliefs. Maybe someone feels guilty for their emotions or believe that they're just too much when that's not the truth at all. Maybe they feel like too much for others to handle. Maybe the exhaustion of compassion fatigue can reinforce this belief, making them withdraw further. We really need to recognize in ourselves, am I having those thoughts that maybe I feel too much for people? And remember, that is a limiting belief. People want to be there. People want to support you. And if people do need to step away for a little bit, remember, this is just to recharge. This is not, again, that sense of for leaving, abandoning. We don't have to withdraw from the kindness. We just have to understand, hey, do you know what? Like, I'm not too much. I am me. I've had my experiences, and I do have these people that love me. And remembering all of these behaviors that I've recognized, not one of them is genuinely, from scientific point of view, it's not an intentional thing. They are survival mechanisms, right? So we need to survive. We need to find our way through the tough things. And our body's going to find a way to make us feel as safe as possible. And all of these mechanisms, all of these reactions, these are not things that we genuinely want to do consciously to push people away. These are just things that come with the feelings and the experiences of trauma. These, again, but when we start to understand our trauma responses, we can start to recognize how you can communicate those things, how you can really understand, yourself and your partner or your family member or your friend, in order to kind of really get, this understanding that we can start to make shifts in the relationships. When we start to understand that our trauma responses have an actual impact, not just on us, but on the people we love, it gives us the power to start shifting them. So how can we recognize compassion fatigue in relationships? How do we actually know when someone we love is experiencing compassion fatigue? Some of the signs, you might have felt it in relationships where you've been the key supporter, but it's those people may seem emotionally exhausted, maybe distant, maybe less responsive than they were in the beginning or before. They express irritation or frustration more easily. Maybe you might feel like they're pulling away and avoiding some deep conversations, maybe just needing a little bit of time alone. Maybe they say things like, I just don't know what to say anymore, or I feel like I'm always trying to fix things. That's fine. They don't know what to say at this point. They've said it, they've given, it's just, again, it's just an experience of exhaustion. We would never really be, hurtful or upset if somebody was exhausted genuinely in life, just tired, because life is busy. So when someone's emotionally exhausted, again, it's not a horrific thing. It's about recognizing, honoring, valuing, and we'll talk about ways that we can kind of work through it. But again, if you're trying to find those signs, maybe in yourself or others, sometimes you'll recognize there's a guilt for needing space, but also maybe feeling, like I said earlier, being overwhelmed, for always being the one that has to be strong. Sometimes that's a real thing. And again, it's not about blaming a trauma survivor at all for their loved one's exhaustion. It's not necessarily their fault. It's all about just recognizing. Okay. Now, I deeply believe that sessions and coaching and therapy, one of the biggest tools that we have, especially in this day and age, is that we have science and knowledge. And I've always learned that if we can compartmentalize what we're experiencing with this language and these theories, we start to be able to develop a language for communication. We're able to explain to others around us a little bit more about why we are the way we are. We are able to say, look, if you are feeling these ways, especially learning this kind of concept, I've been able through my learning to turn to my partner actually and say, listen, I actually recognize that I've been in some like real highs and lows at the minute. And I notice that like you and I don't feel great. I think that maybe, like we just need to talk about it. I think that you might be in compassion fatigue. I really respect you've been there for me. Why don't you do what you need to do to kind of refill your cup? Go and take some time. And I'm not going to feel bad about that because I'm recognizing that this is a thing. It makes me feel less upset. It makes the feelings between us normal. There's nothing necessarily wrong in our relationship. It's just we need to just take a little deep breath of carrying that heaviness and that emotional side of things. So I just think it's really powerful to know all of this, so that it turns, anything that kind of feels heavy in a relationship, like resentment, disconnection, or relationship breakdown, we can actually work through that through communication and knowledge, because we know that if we ignore it, then we're not working through it. And that's why this deep dive is so important, I think. So here are your golden nuggets. How do we try to minimize the overall impact of compassion fatigue? Let's talk again. It's real, but again, it doesn't mean a relationship is doomed. With awareness, intentional action, we can genuinely reduce the effects and create like healthier dynamics. Definitely, somebody can say from personal experience that by communicating better, understanding myself better, especially through this program that you're working on, it deeply strengthened my relationships, because it also deepened my own awareness, and I was able to see things a lot clearer, take things a lot less personal, and really understand, that situation. So one of the key things is this idea of self-awareness. That very first step one in kind of reducing the heaviness, is recognizing when trauma responses are affecting our relationships. Maybe it's, either side. Maybe you carry a lot for friends and family and you feel that compassion fatigue. Maybe it's you just recognizing that. And maybe it's then saying to those, people, I love you so much. It's just been really heavy lately. I'm just going to go and do a little bit of self-care. Those things kind of work really well. Or in our own self, we might recognize that actually it's been a little bit of a triggered month. I know this is my heavy month. I know that this month brings a lot up for me. So I'm going to just make sure I communicate with my partner. I know my hot spots. I know that in October, we know that's a time that maybe I'm going to feel a little bit more heightened, a little bit more hypervigilant, and we're going to work through that so that myself and my partner are aware that that is something that's coming up in a pattern for us. And that allows us to work through it, plan for it. There's extra compassion there and softness for each other. And it really, really helps to kind of really be self-aware, noticing patterns and talking about it. And again, noticing emotional patterns, are there moments of withdrawal or intense outbursts, a sense of emotional neediness? Are there moments, times, dates, whatever? Can you find any sort of patterns? And you can even say to your partner, look, I've learned through my training, or whoever it is that, friend, family, I know that there's this thing called compassionate fatigue that you might be experienced based on, me leaning on you, or, again, it goes both ways. But you can say to your partner, if you notice any patterns, let's sit down and write them down so that we're aware of them. I'm aware, you're aware. What do you think? Is there anything here you can add, especially people who've known you, really long time? And it helps everybody just be a little bit more aware. And again, awareness is not at all about blame. It's just deeply understanding, and those pieces of understanding that creates that beautiful bit of empathy, that creates small shifts in our relationship that can often lead to those, we can create really healthy, strong relationships, actually even stronger, because we have such self-awareness and also compassion for somebody else who might be feeling fatigued rather than feeling upset. Another thing is a way that we can kind of minimize it is to have really healthy boundaries. And those are things that might need to be reevaluated. I always feel like boundaries is such a big word, something that you might be learning through this program to put in place. Boundaries is such a vast topic. But we have to understand that it's okay for us, and it is okay for loved ones to take some space. It doesn't mean anything except space. It doesn't mean anything, metaphorically. If you're, you are tired, you would like to go and sleep. If you are exhausted, you're going to try and have a nap over the weekend, or you're going to try and have a lay-in over the weekend if possible, because you're exhausted. it's the same thing. We're not going to try our best not to pull away, resent, have any sort of negative feelings if somebody just needs a little bit of space, because the emotional heaviness, that compassion fatigue, is just normal. And it actually is a form of kindness and care, isn't it? Compassion. Remembering somebody taking a boundary from setting a boundary with you, you setting a boundary with someone else. It's not you rejecting or anybody rejecting us. It's just self-care sometimes, so that we can all turn up and show up and be present in a much healthier way. We all need to recharge that battery no matter what. So conversations could maybe look like this. I love you, and I need a bit of time to reset so I can show up fully for you. And you can use that. You can use that with somebody that you feel like you're really carrying the weight of. I love you. And I just need a little bit of time to reset again so I can show up fully for you. I just need to recharge my batteries a little bit. That could feel much more normal. It could also be said to somebody if you're recognizing in them and you've really needed to lean on somebody. Look, I know you love me and you've been just an absolute rock star supporting me. Why don't you make sure that you take some time for you this weekend? It would be really great. It's almost recognizing and really highlighting, I see you, I see what you're doing for me. So it works both ways. We can set a boundary, but we can also give some guidance for the people around us who are really, really there for us. We're almost giving them permission and that sense of kindness to go, look, thank you. And that takes away that resentment or fear of rejection. There's lots of great emotional regulation practices as well. Trauma survivors don't have to be perfectly healed to have healthy relationships at all, contrary to popular belief. Healing from trauma, I think, is quite a process and ongoing. It's part of somebody who's experienced trauma. It's part of their story. It's a chapter in their life, and it is going to start shaping many aspects of us. And it could create a great story of strength and resilience and perseverance and growth. And maybe you're on that process now by being part of this program. And so actually finding ways through this program in other ways for your own emotional regulation is actually going to really help. It's going to help you to feel centered or you to support somebody in feeling more centered. And those are all of those techniques you're going to find in your modules, like grounding techniques, the tapping, your butterfly tap, your self-soothing, your deep breathing, and again, continuing to work on our communication skills to kind of reduce this intensity of the trauma. And again, we have to let go of that concept, that limiting belief, I call it, like feeling like we are too much or we are a burden if we have experienced trauma and we need to lean on people. That's not the case at all. But it's also recognizing that compassion fatigue is a thing. And recognizing when somebody's leaning on us, when maybe we just need that space, Again, it's a shared responsibility for healing. A loved one can be supportive, but they can't really be the healer. Recognizing the importance of self-work through therapy, trauma recovery methods, emotional awareness, it really prevents relationships from becoming solely about managing trauma. And that's why signposting people to other community events or working in a program like this to work on ourselves, it is fundamental to really strengthening those relationships. It makes such a difference to those of us who've experienced trauma. It really allows that there to be a shift, responsibility, there's learning. It helps the person who's experienced the trauma to gain confidence again in a new way. And it does shift the relationship. It's really quite powerful. And so when we're looking at these sort of key concepts, it's important to really remember that we can strengthen our relationships through communication and through our knowledge. And I want you to remember that, like, all of this experience, it's, if we are bringing, some of this into our relationships, this is really, my biggest message anytime I ever do a talk is that we need to stop with that negative voice. We need to remind ourselves that we are only genuinely being human. And it's that simple. You are human. And none of these things are huge weaknesses. It's about we now become, through our training, through our coaching, we become aware. And when we're aware that we might be doing things, when we're aware that the trauma might be affecting us in a certain way, or we might be, withdrawing in certain situations, or maybe different layers, we're able to kind of recognize and go, hey, I'm doing that. Or actually, when you feel emotional fatigue or compassion fatigue, when someone, is really leaning on you, you can go, it doesn't mean that I don't love them. I actually might be feeling irritable, but it's not because I'm irritable. I'm exhausted. And I think exhaustion is something that we can all understand in all facets, and it just takes some recharging. And so what's important actually is recognizing this power of self-care. And I know some of us struggle a little bit with that, like feeling self-love, self-care. What is that? But it's going to be different to each of us. So you need to work out what's going to help you recharge your batteries. Or if it's somebody that you feel like they might be taking on a little bit of the emotional fatigue based on, the trauma you might be holding, sometimes the greatest gift you can give them, like we said earlier, is you can recognize what is their self-care and maybe open that up. Maybe create an opportunity for them to have that. I definitely recognize that there's moments when my highs and lows, my triggers personally from my experience of trauma, I know that there's moments when I really feel like I'm leaning on, for example, my husband. But I've actually started to build in moments. I'll say to him, actually, hey, you've not been out in a while. You've been home most nights. I'm fine. Why don't you go out and play darts with the boys? It'd be really good for you to get out, go and do that. That's me really supporting and recognizing, like, maybe I can feel this sense of something wobbly in our relationship. Maybe I'm putting a lot of heaviness on it. Maybe I need to give that person permission so they don't feel guilty. I'm going out and just refilling that, their cup in that way. Or it's, something like saying, I know you like a run, it's been a little while. And again, it's saying like, why don't you go and take some time for you? I'm all right, and then that's when we bring in that self-regulation. If we're the one who does have that neediness, maybe we can bring in our own self-care, and together self-care creates that little bit of calm space, that really nurtured nervous system. And I do think that a lot of those like stress relief grounding techniques, if you have a look, I think that I lead mostly on like module 3, but all the way through module 3 are loads of techniques, skills, thoughts, science, in order to kind of add to those physical grounding techniques that you might want to be reaching for. I'm also going to give you a little tip as well. If you're spending lots of time, like not just over the phone, but face to face, with people and, who are experienced, trauma, or you and vice versa. Walking is a really great way to meet, getting outside, getting fresh air, really having some time out. It actually, there's a real science behind that compassion fatigue being lessened, because even if we are going for a walk, it's this feeling that the body is moving, we've got fresh air, we're connecting with nature. Both parties are doing so. It feels less heavy as when, we're sat really carrying the weight of those feelings. That walk often allows, conversation to flow. It allows, the body to move in a different way, the brains to work, connect. And it does sometimes take that pressure and stress and strain off. So it might even be the way that you're having those conversations or leaning on people. Maybe we can say, hey, I'd love to take you for a coffee. I spoke to my mum recently about just sharing a little bit on this topic as well. At the moment, she's really trying to support her friend who, sadly has lost her daughter. And mum definitely sometimes says to me, I actually don't know what to do anymore, but I just keep trying to, shift where and how and what we do when we meet. And for both her and her friend, it's really starting to create a really, healthy thing. So she's saying, well, why don't we, if you feel up to it, let's go for a walk and have that conversation. And obviously my mom said that it felt really, really light when she did that. Another time, instead of it just being over the phone or face to face in the house, when she feels up to it, her friend and her, they'll meet for a coffee, they'll get some lunch, they'll go to, a special bench, in honor of her daughter. Sometimes they take a drive and they drive and talk, but changing up that atmosphere sometimes as well allows it to feel like less mundane. And then the care shifts, the experience shifts, and the relationship shifts. But always being not scared to kind of say as well, I've learned in my course about this thing called compassion fatigue. This is what it is. If you personally ever feel that on my account, I really want you to know that I get it. I feel it. Maybe, our relationship is wobbled because, we haven't really named it or talked about it, but it's a real thing. And I really appreciate, all you do for me. And I know, I know that you love me, but I also know that you need to refill that cup and that exhaustion, because I'm sure we've all been there or are being there still for other people. So it is all about what this knowledge can do to create that lovely bit of empathy that we want to have for ourselves and others. And it's remembering as well, all of these talks, all of this theory, it's all kind of yours to take with you. You can now figure out how maybe this theory, you can use it to reshape a conversation that you have coming up, maybe a boundary that we set with somebody. But I really deeply want us to understand that it is absolutely not about blaming anybody. It's not about blaming yourself on how trauma, affects your relationships. It is deeply just about awareness and the small little shifts, learning how to show up in ways that nourish both of you and the people who love you. So it's so lovely. This could be, a family member, whoever it is that we really lean on or that lean on us. Again, it's about that space, that understanding and awareness creates that, obviously, a little bit of strength and kindness and care. When we take care of ourselves, always remember, when we learn, this is all about learning how to regulate ourselves emotionally. It's about developing a really great language for healthy communication. And balance, it creates a sense of balance in our relationships. It means that we can create a world where both we and our loved ones can truly, really thrive. And I deeply believe that that is part of the healing journey, really, really breaking down what that looks like. Maybe, I can definitely say that based on learning about compassion fatigue, I realized maybe why a few of my friendships had changed and shifted. And over time, I did get back in touch with people and say, I wanted to say thank you for all you did to support me. And if you wanted to reconnect, I'd be really up for that. Rather than feeling resentful and hurt, which I had felt at one point, I kind of reached out with an olive branch and rebuilt some of those relationships. So there's some beautiful, beautiful things that we can do with this knowledge. And I wanted to just say, if you wanted any more information on this, you can absolutely, there's loads of resources. I will post a few kind of books and I will send a few podcasts for you. But don't forget to check in with Bon. This is a great conversation for some of your one-to-one coaching as well, to be like, do you know what? I really recognized that conversation. How can I continue to develop that? Because when you start in a coaching conversation or a therapy session working on a specific relationship, obviously these talks are quite broad. You might be able to really break down what it is you could do to strengthen those relationships that might feel strained based on the impact of trauma. Remember that if you need anything as well, I'm always open to questions, especially where Bon's away. Just write underneath or say, Megan, can we get in touch? I'm more than happy to support. I really do hope that this helps strengthen your resilience in terms of, emotional and compassionate fatigue, what that is like for people around us, for ourselves. And, just know that you've got this, know that we're here for you, and just keep doing the work. You're doing an amazing job. This is such a journey. And so remembering, that it's not your fault, and it is just about finding that awareness and bringing that into your day to day. All right, peace and love, my friends. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, I will see you again. The video will be posted at 10:15 on Friday, like it always is, but I just won't be there in live time based on the fact that I'll be with my son. But in future, when he goes to school, I'll be here. So anyways, big love. Have a great weekend, all of you, wherever you are in the world. All the love.